What's up, folks? I want to go over my league starter for the Ritual League, my Earthquake Ignite Elementalist. Yes, it was as weird as you think it is. Don't mind that pile of cables right there. I will clean that up at some point. But this was my league starter. I think it performed basically as well as I expected it to do. There's still a lot of things I could change on it, modify about it. But we'll go over all of that. I'm going to go over the gems, the gear, the passive tree, how I leveled it, and such. Mapping with it was pretty straightforward. You probably, if I got around to show some footage here, just run around, right click on things, keep your Seismic Cry, your Orbis Storms active as much as possible, flame dash from pack to pack, slap it down, and then whenever you get to the point that you have Val Earthquake ready to go, you can pop some rituals, pop the old T button there, and run around in circles, and everything will die pretty easily. I had no problems in mapping other than things like no regen were basically impossible. Reduced regen can be a little tricky. I still did it from time to time. The other things that were not doable on the build are things like avoid elements. So if you get 70% avoid elements, that one's a little tricky to do. You can do it. I've accidentally run those maps a couple of times, but I wouldn't go recommending doing that on the regular. Reflect, however, you can do. You are reflect immune for both elemental and physical. So Dwiddy and Dawn makes it so you don't do any physical damage, and your Ascendancy, of course, makes it so you don't do any elemental damage. So both of those are completely doable. And in mapping, your golems will die here and there, but they'll pop right back up in about 4 seconds due to the Ascendancy, so there's no real problems there either. Overall, it was a pretty smooth experience for leveling and ritual just because of Val Earthquake being so powerful, and letting you just kind of run through packs with a phasing flask and not really care. Also, Val Earthquake 21-23 costs like 20C, if that. When I bought it, I think it was 20C, now I think it's like 10C. Whatever the price is, but overall I very much enjoyed the leveling experience. Now, as far as how I ended up doing my gems, you of course got your golems, your ice, your flame, your lightning, and your chaos stone golem. I kept those in the helmet, the 4 that you saw there, and then kept chaos golem in the ring. Depending on how you want to do your kind of reductions in this build with physical reduction, then you probably want to switch those around if you want more defenses, but for now it was just that way, just because I got that +2 socketed golem gems in there, and that gives me that next level of power for the golems. As far as attack goes, we got Val Earthquake 21-23 connected to deadly elements, fortify support, burning damage, unbound elements, and Fist of War. Now, when I was mapping, of course, I would be using well, I don't have it on me. I would be using Ignite Prolif. I thought I had my weapon swap, but Ignite Prolif was the mapping swap, so Unbound Elements is when I'm bossing. Ignite Prolif is for mapping. For me, to trigger Elemental Overload, which we are, Orbis Storms attached to nothing, basically, is all I was using. Just chuck it down every now and then. If I had a higher crit axe, it would kind of do the triggering for me, but I did Orbis Storms just to keep it up, and there's a kind of a weird thing that happens with Blackflame that I'll go into in a little bit once I'm done with all this, that we kind of require Orbis Storms for, and I'll explain that just a bit. We got Malevolence and Herald of Ash on a Enlighten support. I lowered my HP a little bit to grab the nodes over here for more reservation. What that allowed me to do was get Aspect of the Spider on my glove or any other piece of gear, and so we're running both Malevolence, Herald of Ash, and Aspect of the Spider, which is just a good another layer of damage and defenses from that. We got Seismic Cry, we got Flame Dash for movement, and Spell Totem with Wither on it. Not a problem at all when it comes to bossing, putting this stuff down. It pops down really quick, and then you can just keep it up with Orbis Storms, and this is what I was talking about. When you have Blackflame equipped, and you ignite something, or something is ignited while you have Wither going onto it, okay? So you got your Wither Totem down, and you have it ignited, i.e. by Orbis Storms, because everything we do ignites. As long as that enemy stays ignited, the Wither stack will persist. So if you get Spell Totem down and get something ignited, and you just keep pressing Orbis Storms on a 1-tick ratio, so whenever it ticks, you put another one down, the Wither will never drop off of it. but if the Ignite drops, then the Wither will drop. And we tested this in PvP, so I'm assuming that's how it works for monsters as well, but we just know from PvP that that's the way it functions. And it's very powerful for longer boss fights. It works very well. Now, there are instances where something like Awakener, where he teleports, he will remove his Ignites, so it can be a little annoying. But overall, it does work very well for longer fights to be able to keep that on there. Once the Wither stack is going, you don't have to really worry about it. For me, though, because I'm waiting for Fist of War between my hits, so I'm attacking once, and while that's going, I'm also, you know, running around keeping everything up. You got plenty of time to do other stuff along the way, and it works out pretty well in the long run as a rotation for the character. Getting your Orb of Storms down, using the Wither Totem, and then every 4 attacks using Seismic Cry. So that was pretty handy for that setup, just having Orb of Storms there, also proccing your Elemental Overload. It does a lot of heavy lifting at once, is what I'm trying to get to at here. So overall, the gyms were pretty straightforward, pretty easy to understand. Big upgrade for me would still be like Awaken Deadly Ailments, Awaken Burning Damage, Awaken Unbound Elements would also be really strong, and if I really wanted to go ham, I could get, I think it's Anomalous Fist of War, which is the one that slows your attack speed and gives you giga hits. And this is where we come into the first little problem I've had with the build, which is a problem I kind of put on myself by accidentally creating this axe. So I accidentally created this axe by using like 4 Jagged Fossils on it, and I made a really fat physical axe with no attack speed, right? So when it comes to me recommending this build to other people, my biggest recommendation is get luckier than I did and get an axe with attack speed on it. It is a little slow to attack, as you can tell, when you use an attack, and that was one of the things that sometimes got me off guard and got me killed. This definitely has not been a deathless run by me at any point. I've done maps that I really shouldn't be doing, done content I shouldn't be doing at levels I shouldn't be doing them at. So it was definitely a little bit of a learning experience with the build, but I had a lot of fun doing it. So first thing I would say is once if you're gonna think about doing this, get an attack speed act that has like better than 1.15, right? Your golem is doing a lot of heavy lifting when you have a 1.15 axe. Right, so get something like 1.3, 1.4, lose a little bit of top end DPS, and you'll be fine. Or flat DPS, you'll get more DPS, I think, with an attack speed axe. And I probably could have done the same here if I were to have like AUG speed and then use the crit quality, or if I were to have at least used an Exalt level the craft on it for attack speed. Any of that could have helped a lot, and it would have brought that top end up quite heavily. So that's the first thing I kind of probably should have done better. Blackflame, of course, best in slot for this build. It's just so nice. The biggest downside of Blackflame is the graphical glitch right now, where you have purple boxes all over your screen. If you're attacking something that's ghosted, spectral, or otherwise that has an aura effect, you'll just have purple boxes everywhere. So that's kind of weird, but other than that, it's a really strong amulet or ring, because what it lets you do is not worry about elemental equilibrium. It lets you run Despair instead, and then all you have to do is worry about Wither. You could also run like Witchfire Brew before you get a Despair on hit ring, and it works just marvelously. This thing is amazing for Ignite if you don't want to be like an elemental equilibrium where you're already doing like lightning damage or already doing cold damage, whatever like that. And the benefit of Blackflame is it does let you go to Avatar Fire and have that full conversion to Elemental, and thus you could do a lot more Elemental scaling like Wed and things like that on your tree, or your gear will be a lot stronger for you. Comb's Heart, we're just running big old Comb's Heart because, well, quite frankly, it's just a lot of HP. There is something to be said about getting maybe like an Elder chest or a Pop chest for more better clear, because there has been times when I forgot to switch off of Unbound Elements or Ignite Prolift for mapping, and I didn't actually notice it until like way later on. So I don't know if you completely need the Ignite Prolift Maybe. It's debatable, but you could go for an Elder Chest with a bunch of HP, percent HP, get some resistances on there as well, and it will let you weave in something like Enduring Cry, maybe, or Cast on Damage Taken, something like that for a lot more defenses, make yourself a lot tankier. Now, of course, I go down to 5,600 HP if I take this off, but you could probably come back up to 6,000 or so HP, get a Cast on Damage Taken set up, get an Enduring Cry set up, so you got Endurance Charges, you got some Immortal Call action in there. I think that would be defensively way stronger for the build, and probably in the long run a lot more endgame viable than this setup was for me. But it's you know, it's a personal choice, and for me, I just didn't want to put the time or effort into making that chest piece for myself. Though with Harvest right now, you could probably just do Reforge with Life over and over again, and you would be pretty much able to get it within a, you know, couple hours of playtime of just farming Harvest. For, as you can tell, my accuracy, 94% chance. Everything is coming from my gloves currently. I wish I had divined these better. I kept throwing divines at these whenever I could. If this had like 580 accuracy on it, I would basically be at like 98% chance to hit, which would be fine. I'm a little low. Sometimes I miss, and you do notice it. 94 is a little bit on the low side. But overall, the accuracy roll that I have is just from the gloves. I have accuracy nowhere else on my gear that I'm aware of. So you don't really need a lot, because the Golem, when it gets to... Oops, wrong one. When it gets to level 22, it does give you that advanced buff. And because you have everything being buffed by your Golems, that goes up a whole lot more. And it's pretty easy to be able to accuracy cap yourself with just that one tier 1 roll on the gloves. Now, the other thing that your gloves are doing is, of course, your fire damage over time multiplier. You're going to need that everywhere you can get it, because it is very, very strong. I think I only have it on that one piece, actually. This was ignites faster, but get fire damage over time multiplier, get your physical fossils, get life, get accuracy. I bought these gloves for, I think, like an Exalt or so. They weren't very expensive. It's just a weird setup of traits that a lot of people don't need, and then I put Aspect of the Spider on it, and of course the Fizz to Fire conversion as well. But I think you could probably get these by doing like Scorched and Jagged and seeing what you can get. You could even go Mega Ham and go Scorched, Jagged, and Pristine to try to land something similar to it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the big thing I would look for is the fire damage over time multiplier and the accuracy on them. If you don't get accuracy here, you're going to need to get it on your amulet, you're going to need to get it on your ring, something like that. You can get accuracy basically anywhere. Of course, my ring is pretty bog standard, so I could probably get accuracy on my ring if I needed to. And then Flat Fizz, wherever you can get it. I got it a little bit here and a lot on my amulet, but overall, still good for the build. It gives you a little bit more base damage. It's just good for DPS. And then physical to fire conversion, we get 20% from the gloves. We get another 20/20 from there, and of course Avatar Fire does the rest. So we are fully in the fire side of things. Dwidian Dawn, best in slot, no doubt about it. You're not going to beat it. It's ignites with deal damage 42% faster with a 20% attack modifier on there from quality. It's just strong. It gives you a lot of DPS. And yes, your ignite becomes shorter when you have Blackflame and Dwidian Dawn. You have a pretty quick ignite. It's about 2.5 seconds for me. But with the Fist of War rotation hitting on those marks, you should be basically keeping up your ignite at all times. And you don't need it to be the standard 4 or 5 second ignite. Unless you really want to be comfortable. In some fights, you could maybe swap out some stuff, maybe go an E. There's ways to do it. If you want to get more duration on your ignite, by all means you can. But for me, this was just fine in terms of like a rotation for damage. I think I'm hitting for about 3 million ignite DPS right now. If I remember correctly, on the last smack of Seismic Cry, then there's no reason to worry about going for anything hammer than that. Movement speed, life, resistances, and the ignites you inflict deal faster. I got a tier 2 one. I wish it was a tier 1 one, but I got unlucky with an AUG Fire. That's what you want on your boots. Do make sure that if you are picking up two-tone boots that, you know, you don't pick up something you can't wear. I thankfully have enough dex from wearing the amulet and trying to get in deadly ailments, but in the beginning, be careful with your dex requirements. Like I said, Despair on Hit Ring, pretty strong. Max life on there, just crafted on with a bit of resistances. It worked out for me. I spammed this using the Harvest Craft for Caster. So Caster Harvest Crafting that was pretty easy. I think it took It took a lot because it went elemental weakness and despair back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But just spam caster on there and you'll land one pretty easily, or you could land one something that you could modify. I'd grab a couple of these bases and maybe even try to sell some, because you do get some good rings along the way that people will just buy. So that's always good. The amulet is the most important part when it comes to upscaling your DPS. This amulet is giving me about 700k DPS. It's pretty ridiculous. You want to get that elemental damage quality on there, and then burning brutality is the anoint. Make sure you get it on a jade base, because you do need the dex for deadly elements, and your ice golem as well. So the way I got this was literally just jagged spamming, right? So both the flat fizz and the fizz damage over time, physical as fire damage is also both physical, so just jagged spamming over and over again. I think it took me about 50 or 60 jaggeds to get this one. I had a couple along the way that I needed to annul because I wanted to get HP on them. As you can tell, HP is also a prefix, so you are looking for a triple prefix. So for me, this was kind of the hardest part of the build to get, but I ended up landing on this one and able to make it work with some good augment life on there, because it came with no life. I just got lucky with that. But the thing you're going to be looking for the most of is that tier 1 Warlord's Fizz as extra fire. That is a massive DPS boost, and if you get a tier 1 Fizz, good. Tier 2 is great. Tier 3 you could probably even still keep with the flat Fizz, so by all means, any of those are just fine. And you don't need the highest of life, because, you know, you are rocking already 7,500 or 7,000. But, you know, Combs is doing a lot of the heavy lifting there. That was a random sale. Where was I? So, yeah, for the amulet, just jagged spam yourself an amulet. See what you can get. Try to get... The biggest thing is that fizz extra fire, and then try to get yourself a physical damage to attacks as well. Helmet-wise, you could do bound fossils. That's the one for minions, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. I think that's what I did. Bound and pristine. Got this thing. I want to augment this with chaos still, so that I could try to get that minus chaos resist for all enemies nearby. That is why it is a hunter base, but I never got around to it. But it would be the next upgrade in the build. As far as what I would still change about the build, like I said, maybe that chest piece, so you get that cast on damage taken, enduring cry set up in there would be really, really strong. I'm not saying use enduring cry on cast on damage taken. Just get like a 4-link enduring cry with Immortal Call duration cast on damage taken, and then use a enduring cry to generate, you know, self-cast the enduring cry to get yourself some endurance charges. That would make you a whole lot thicker. The other thing is, as you can tell, I have way too much lightning damage and way too much cold resist. Fire resist. What am I talking about? I have way too much fire resist and way too much cold resist. I have just enough lightning resist. All sorts of confusing. I would probably try to lower my resistances there and try to get that chaos resist up a little bit. I think that would be very, very strong for the build if I could get my chaos resist over back into the positives. And I do have the wiggle room in my resistances to do that, and I think just by getting some harvest crafts, removing one resist and putting on a chaos resist, whatever have you, I could probably get around to somehow figuring that out, to getting it in there and working out a way to get my chaos resist, if not to 75, maybe somewhere in the 50s, and that would be pretty strong and defensive as well. My Fettle doesn't have anything on it. I should get a chaos resist on there as well for another 6, so there's definitely plenty of wiggle room to try to get that chaos resist a whole lot higher. That would be another thing I would do. Like I said, definitely get a higher attack speed axe, like a 1.3, 1.4 would be pretty good. I'd lower that flat fizz down, or get lucky, you know, and try to actually get something. Maybe even build this on a different base with more attack speed. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff there that you can modify and bring it to your own desires. And as far as the passive tree is concerned, it's basically what we had in the original video. I dropped the Scion Life Wheel and just grabbed a lot more of the big nodes around. I grabbed Tireless and Quick Recovery, finally, because I ended up having kind of a mana issue with the Earthquake since we do have no leech really in the build, so just trying to like sustain everything was a little bit tricky, so I wanted to lower the cost of that just a little bit down, so I ended up dropping the Scion Life Wheel, grabbing Tireless and Quick Recovery, and HP wise I'm still pretty good. I do have this one dex node here still because I do need some dex for my deadly ailments. I was able to drop this one because we have the Jade Amulet in its place, and also just kind of moved around the tree in a little bit different fashion to fit in this cluster jewel. But overall, it's pretty much what we had in the original setup. As for how I leveled it, I went right into Earthquake at 38. I would not recommend doing that. I would recommend doing either Fireball, Armageddon Brand, or Flame Wall, depending on your leveling of choice, going straight into Shaper of Flames first. Go Liege of the Primordial first, and then when you get to Cruel Lab, go Shaper of Flames, and then you can switch over to going Earthquake if you want to. Flame Wall, Fireball, and Armageddon Brand all are really, really strong. When you just come out of here, grab yourself Elemental Overload, go up here, grab the Life, grab yourself Breath of Flames, grab yourself Holy Fire, and come down and start grabbing the life and things as you see fit from all over the tree. And that way you just have a lot of fire damage over time, which makes something like Fireball, Flame Wall, or Armageddon Brand really, really strong when it comes to its Ignite potential, its Ignite damage, and you could just level with that super, super easily, just run through everything in the game. Now, have I been able to do Maven or any of the endgame super hard content on this build? Not yet. Basically, I kind of got sidetracked to the point that I never got to Maven. Completely. I have one Splinter, and the last couple days I've been spent trying to get off this character because I kept getting ritual things that I had to pick up, but I'm really interested in my next character, which is Frostbomb Elementalist using Archmage, and so I never got to Maven, but I have done Awakener 8 on it, and Awakener 8 is doable. It's not that difficult. The biggest problem with it is that Awakener can sometimes go into these repetitive patterns of teleportation where he'll just keep warping around everywhere, and it's really hard to get Ignite damage onto him when he does that, and it's absolutely frustrating, but I was still able to kill Awakener just fine. I do have a lot of experience with the fight, so it's a little bit easier for me to do on almost any character, but it is Awakener 8 viable, I would say. I tried to do the 4 Shaper Guardians fight on this character, and that's kind of where I had the biggest issue of my attack speed being a little too low on this axe. It's hard to find, I sounded like a pirate there, hard to find an opening for that kind of attack hit to be able to get into a rhythm with it. And I was tired. It was the last thing I did of the night, and I was a little overwhelmed by the fight because it was my first time going into it. I think now I could go in and do it. I just don't know. I can't say personally whether this would be Maven viable. But as far as endgame viable, as far as content viable, I really think you could do any of the old content, no problem at all. Maven, I don't know about yet. I'll let you, know in the description when I get to Maven myself if I can actually do it. But we'll find out. We'll find out. Overall, though, I really enjoyed this build. I think it's one of the most interesting and fun starters I've had in a long time. I think if I had really wanted to and really wanted to go in and really change up the build some more, where I could get my Chaos Resist, I could drop the Comb's Heart, get in that Elder Chest, get that max life, get a cast on damage taken set up, get my Enduring Cry, maybe modify, get myself a new axe for attack speed. I think I could take this build even further than it currently sits at, but for now, this is where I'm going to be leaving the build. I'm very, very happy with how it turned out. And I'm very surprised that it worked as well as it did as a starter. I was a little bit worried when the original price of a Blackflame was like 200C, but it came down really quickly, and by the end of it, I got mine for 15 Chaos. Now they're like a Chaos a piece. No one's using them, and the only problem with them really is you get purple boxes everywhere. So overall, it's a pretty good build. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope some people check it out, have some fun with it. It's a little bit different, being a two-handed witch walking around smacking things kind of in a big meaty fashion is pretty interesting. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and yeah, that's it for me. Have a nice day.